These people did terrible things and they had to pay the prices. Here are the top 10 convicts freaking out after the judge gives them a life sentence. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Seandell Jackson. In a 2010 case, the courtroom atmosphere turned highly dramatic during the sentencing of 19-year-old Seandell Jackson. Jackson had been found guilty of the first-degree intentional killing and robbery of 21-year-old Nathan Potter, a University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee student. Jackson and his accomplice, Derek Thomas, attempted to rob Potter, ultimately taking his life, even though Potter did not have any money. Throughout the trial, Jackson displayed no remorse or sadness for his crime or for the victim's death. In fact, he even smiled at the victim's family while being escorted out of the courtroom. John Potter, the victim's father, addressed Judge Rebecca Dallett during the trial, acknowledging that nothing could bring back his son, but asking for an appropriate punishment for the horrific crime. He pondered if there was such a thing as pure evil, expressing his belief that it existed. When Jackson was sentenced to life in prison without parole, his reaction turned violent as he began cursing at the judge. Prompt action by the police, who anticipated such behavior based on his actions during the trial, was required to restrain him, including the use of pepper spray. Meanwhile, members of Jackson's family seated in the back of the courtroom started hurling insults at Potter's mother after the sentencing, expressing their hatred and proclaiming that God would be the ultimate judge. Well, not in this courtroom, but also, good luck with him. In our number 9 spot today, we have Erika Butts and Shanita Cunningham. Erika Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham faced trial for the tragic killing of an extremely vulnerable person who was under their care. While Cunningham admitted guilt by pleading guilty, Butts opted for an Alford plea, asserting her innocence, but acknowledging the likelihood of conviction if the case went to trial. Anticipating some degree of leniency, their hopes were shattered when the judge handed down life sentences for both defendants. As the judge announced the severe sentence, Butts experienced a complete breakdown in the courtroom. Overwhelmed with emotions, she let out screams, collapsed, and began hyperventilating. Simultaneously, Cunningham fainted and had to be wheeled out of the courtroom to receive medical attention. The gravity of the situation and the weight of their sentences took an immediate toll on their composure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Manson Bryant. Manson Bryant, a career criminal found guilty of robbery, kidnapping, and an armed robbery in 2018, had an unexpected change of demeanor during his sentencing. Initially, he spoke in his defense, acknowledging the poor choices he had made, attributing them to substance abuse, and expressing his commitment to personal improvement. He even praised the justice system as a whole and expressed gratitude to the court for its decision. This is all fine and well until everything took a very sharp turn when the judge pronounced a 22-year sentence. In an instant, Bryant's demeanor shifted dramatically. He erupted in anger, unleashing a torrent of curses towards the court and hurling accusations of racism towards the judge. His outburst was prolonged, filled with numerous expletives, and in response to his behavior, the judge imposed an additional 6-year sentence as a consequence. I truly can't imagine what it would feel like to receive a prison sentence at all, let alone a very long one like that, but the response definitely did not do him any favors at all. In our number 7 spot today, we have Michael Marin. This story is unlike the others on this list today, and that is because rather than a freakout, this man did the unthinkable. Michael Marin is a man who had fallen into financial hardship and could no longer afford his mortgage payments, so he devised a desperate plan to solve his problems. After his attempt to raffle his mansion for charity failed, he resorted to arson in order to collect insurance money. When Marin was apprehended and brought to trial, he quickly realized the severity of his charges: arson and insurance fraud. The minimum sentence he faced was 7 years, but it could potentially be extended to 21 years, which, given his age of 53, essentially equated to a life sentence in his eyes. When the judge pronounced him guilty, a visible reaction of despair could be seen as Marin raised his hands to his face. However, what no one in the courtroom knew at the time was that Marin's reaction went beyond mere despair. In a shocking turn of events, he had secretly placed a cyanide capsule in his mouth and washed it down with a drink. Shortly after, he began convulsing, succumbing to the poison in full view of everyone present. In our number 6 spot today, we have Brice Webb. Brice Webb, already serving a lengthy prison sentence for the slaying of his ex-girlfriend, found himself in even deeper trouble when he committed additional offenses behind bars. Initially sentenced to 50 years for the aforementioned crime, Webb later received a life sentence for another act of the same crime, this time committed during his incarceration. However, his misdeeds did not stop there. While in jail, Webb faced charges of attempting to take the life of 2 correctional facility employees. The judge presiding over the trial had to recuse herself due to her personal acquaintance with the victims. In a shocking display of disrespect, Webb responded by spitting at the judge. As a result of this contemptible act, he received an additional 37 years added to his sentence for the aforementioned killings. Furthermore, Webb faced a separate trial for his attack on the judge. Considering the significant penalties he had already accumulated, it begs the question, what more did he have to lose? In our number 5 spot today, we have Keith Ferguson. In moments of utter despair, individuals may respond in different ways. While some may choose to accept their circumstances with composure, others, like Keith Ferguson, may exhibit a different reaction. After being found guilty of the killings of his wife and father-in-law, Ferguson received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Judge Mertz addressed Ferguson, acknowledging that while he may not fit the clinical definition of insanity, there was undeniably something fundamentally wrong with him. Mertz emphasized that Ferguson's actions, which deprived an elderly woman of her lifelong partner and 4 children of their mother solely to satisfy his own selfish desires, deserves the most severe punishment. Interrupting, Ferguson uttered the word justice, but undeterred, Judge Mertz continued, stating that justice in this case required the most significant and serious penalty. During the sentencing proceedings, Ferguson opted not to stand or raise his hand as requested. Instead, he directed profanities toward those present in the courtroom, expressing a complete disregard for the consequences. Even when removed from the room, his defiance remained evident as he proclaimed that he would see everyone there in the depths of hell. In our number 4 spot today, we have Randall Moore. Expressing remorse can often play a very significant role in mitigating a severe sentence, but for those devoid of it, redemption remains elusive. Such was the case for Randall Moore, who demonstrated no remorse for the killing of his wife and the shooting of a police officer, resulting in 3 consecutive life sentences. During the court hearing, as the victim's mother bravely delivered an impact statement, Moore callously interrupted her, using the opportunity to hurl hurtful insults. He claimed that her daughter despised her and demeaned her as a loser. Throughout the proceedings, Moore made it clear that he harbored no regrets and instead assigned blame to the victim's mother and others whom he held responsible for preventing him from seeing his son. Astonishingly, he even went as far as telling the officer he shot that he could have taken his life if he desired, asserting that he had done the officer a favor. Moore's lack of remorse and the contemptuous manner in which he addressed the victim's mother and the wounded officer offer a very chilling glimpse into the dark depths of his character. It underscores the absence of empathy and accountability, further deepening the gravity of his crimes. In our number 3 spot today, we have Jeremy Christian. The sentencing of Jeremy Christian began on a very tumultuous note as the convicted killer launched into a disturbing tirade, callously expressing regret that he hadn't killed a survivor as well. Christian's heinous act occurred in 2017 when he took the lives of 2 train passengers in Portland and attempted to kill another, ultimately leading to his conviction on 12 charges. During an impact statement in response to the victim expressing her wish for him to suffer in hell, Christian coldly retorted that he would see her there, exacerbating the tension in the courtroom. Furthermore, he proceeded to chant the name George Floyd after directing offensive remarks at the judge, further displaying his utter disregard for decorum and respect. Christian's shocking behavior during the sentencing is a stark reminder of the profound darkness that dwells within him, reflecting a complete lack of empathy and remorse for the lives he took and the pain that he inflicted upon others. He also had the worst haircut I've ever seen on a human being. It's definitely the least of his concerns, but I just couldn't move on before also mentioning that. Barber also deserves a life sentence. In our number 2 spot today, we have Michael Swanson. At the age of 18, Michael Swanson faced trial for the horrific act of taking the lives of 2 people. His criminal rampage began with the merciless killing of a store clerk during a robbery and was tragically repeated at another location. Shockingly, when Swanson was convicted of his heinous crimes, he responded with laughter, displaying a disturbing lack of remorse. During the sentencing proceedings, as the judge delivered the verdict of life imprisonment, A disconcerting smile spread across Swanson's face. Despite the judge's stern warning of potentially extending his sentence, it is uncertain whether such a threat held significant weight given Swanson's apparent detachment and just disregard for the severity of his actions. The chilling demeanor exhibited by Swanson throughout the trial and sentencing unveils a deeply troubled individual who seemingly finds amusement in the suffering he has caused. The profound absence of remorse only serves to emphasize the gravity of his crimes and the tragic loss experienced by the victims and their family. In our number 1 spot today, we have Brice Rhodes. This is someone who has had multiple outbursts during different court proceedings and someone who often appears to be troublesome in the courtroom. During one of the trials of Brice Rhodes, who was charged with a triple homicide, his behavior as a defendant was characterized by anger, erraticism, and confusion. Despite facing the possibility of the death penalty or life imprisonment, Rhodes displayed a surprising lack of distress. Throughout the court proceedings, Rhodes repeatedly disrupted them with his outbursts. He made unfounded accusations, such as accusing the judge of belonging to a white supremacy group, and in a particularly disturbing act, Rhodes even spit on one of the lawyers involved in the case. He fired his lawyers, made nonsensical statements, and callously mocked the families of his victims by smiling at them. Rhodes' defense attorney argued that he required a competency test, suggesting that his behavior was indicative of mental health issues. However, the families of the victims viewed this as a mere ploy to waste time and delay justice. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kosolowski, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye!